Here with writer, director, producer Clint Bentley of not only Jockey, but for those that remember back in the day, Transpecos, which a lovely film that came through Dallas and was at South by.
Which I didn't direct. My writing producing partner directed that one,
Greg, if you want to introduce
Greg Cuidar, great director, and I'm very lucky to have him as a creative partner.
Can you talk a bit about that? Because you guys have kind of switched, like you write together, but direct one and then direct the other?
Yeah, we write together and then one produces and the other one directs, and we just kind of switch off. And it's been a thing that just kind of, it happened organically. We met and we were both trying to be writer, director, producers and just do it all like any independent filmmaker is. And then we just found we were making better stuff together than apart, and just kind of figure out a way to make it work. And it's been very nice.
Now, speaking of diving back into Transpecos, because I was blown away by that movie, and it's also, I believe, how you guys got in contact with Clifton, because he was in that movie.
That's right.
How did that come about? Where did that kind of deciding to shoot that and make that film, and where did that come from?
That, to make a very long story short, at least a little bit short, is both Greg and I, we didn't go to film school, neither of us, and we grew up in different parts of the country, me in Florida and Greg in Texas. And when we were becoming filmmakers in college and post-college, it was around the border. Like he was going through his own journey on the border, I was going through mine, and we were trying to figure out this big question of like what's going on down there and doing it through film. And so when we met each other, we both had that was one of the things that sparked our friendship. And he had the idea, he had a short film script actually for Transpecos, and it was really evocative and really cool. And he had this idea to look at the border through the eyes of the men and women who work on the border, and it's just their day job. And that was something that it was a fresh perspective that I didn't think about, and I don't think a lot of people were thinking about at the time. And it was a really interesting way to take the movie, because what we found out through the process of the 6 years it took to make that movie, we spent a lot of time with Border Patrol agents just talking to them. We found that all of them have a completely different view of their job and of what they think they're supposed to be doing down there. And it was really interesting.
Yeah, the perspectives that you guys captured in that film by the three guys was pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, it was, that's how we got into contact with Clifton. Being a fan of his work in Capote and Traffic and things like that, so many other roles that he's done, and we just had him in the movie as a supporting character. But he really just blew us away in terms of what he could do as an actor, but then also who he was as a person. He's such a good person and such an interesting person, and he really taught us to be better filmmakers and better writers. And so we wrote a role for him as Jackson Silva.
So I'm curious, as far as this film, I think this one is way more personal. I mean, with your dad's story, and also Clifton's story. I didn't realize he had kind of a connection to that world in a very unique way. How did you get Greg on board with this idea? I mean, I read in y'all's press kit that you really made him sleep in the back with you guys. I mean, you really kind of just showed him the life, and he's like, I get it.
Yeah, and there wasn't much making him. It's something that like we both get very excited about that part of the process, which is like discovering a world. And for him, it was truly discovering it, because he had never been. I don't think he had been to a racetrack before, but he certainly hadn't spent any time on the backside at the barns and everything. And so I took him back there because I felt like there was a movie, but also I rely on him and he relies on me to like kind of be the other's bullshit meter a little bit of like, is this right or not? And so I wanted to get his gut check on like, yeah, this would be interesting to somebody outside of just the world of horse racing. And so, yeah, we went back there, and a lot of jockeys start out sleeping in tack rooms because they don't have any money to like have an apartment or anything like that. And so you just sleep in the tack room where all the saddles are kept and all that. And we just spent a few days behind racetrack and barns, and it was really like, it was really eye-opening for me, and it was kind of like a way of rediscovering the world by seeing it through his eyes.
I'm curious as far as the tracks themselves. I mean, we've got like Lone Star here locally. What did you like about Turf Paradise that was like, there's something about this?
Yeah. There's, I mean, if for anybody who's seen the movie, it's such an evocative place that like you step onto that track and you automatically feel that there's a spirit there, and it's something that like part of it is the landscape around it. You can see the mountains outside of Phoenix, the mountains that are north of Phoenix, and there's all these palm trees, and just the Phoenix sunsets are incredible. They had this like purplish hue to them that I didn't expect. But the other thing about it, like at a broader level, is a lot of the racetracks around the country, they get bought up by casinos, and then they get renovated and updated, and they end up looking like shopping malls or baseball stadiums. Like or casinos. Like you wouldn't know that it's a racetrack, and they lose a lot of that character. And Turf Paradise hadn't lost that character yet, and so that was a big part of it.
Has that old timey feel, like the way it used to be?
Yeah, exactly. And you can see on the walls, like they have pictures all over the walls of back in the day, like in the 50s and 60s, like Mickey Rooney and Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe used to take planes out from LA to Turf Paradise to Phoenix and would spend a day or two at the races, and it was just wild to see like that on the wall, and then like you were seeing in the stands what you see in the movie, which is like there's not many people there at the races. It was a really interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the views and the look of the film. Can you talk a bit about your DP, Adolfo, and how you went with that choice? Because he didn't shoot Trans-Pecos.
No, he didn't shoot Trans-Pecos. Jeff Waldron shot Trans-Pecos and did an amazing job. And Adolfo, I could talk for hours about Adolfo and his work. His work speaks for itself. But Adolfo was not my first choice to shoot it, but only because I didn't know him. Like I was a big fan of his, and I'm a fan of a lot of DPs. But I was talking to a couple of other DPs to shoot Jockey, and for one reason or another, they couldn't do it. And we were looking at like we were about to push, and we decided we were about to push into like the following year, which would have been 2020, and we decided to like just go through the list of like all these. I just keep a running list of like DPs that I like, either from commercials that I see or films or anything. And Adolfo was top of that list from a documentary that he had shot called On Yoga, Architecture of Peace, which is incredible. And so we just reached out to him, just sent him an email. We found his email on his website and just sent him an email, and he responded to the material, and then we responded to each other, and we had 2 Skype calls, and he signed up for it, and I'm so thankful that he did. And he said something on the last one. He's like, on the second one, he's like, you're taking a big risk here. You don't know me, but I'm taking a big risk, and I don't know you, and let's do it together. And
yeah, I mean, he's worked on some big directors' films. I mean, Adolfo's been around. Yeah,
he's worked with some huge directors, but mostly on the commercial side. Like he shot with Nicholas Winding Refn and some amazing directors, but he hadn't done many features before doing Jockey. I think Jockey was like his 3rd feature, maybe. Yeah. And his first one in the States. And I'm very, very thankful I got to work with him at all. I hope I get to continue to.
So if you don't mind, I'd love to talk about certain scenes that were shot.
I know a couple of them. I'll remember a couple of them.
I hope so, yeah. This one's not at Turf Paradise. It's the sequence that takes place, I think it's Salt River. It's just outside.
Yeah.
How the hell do you capture that? Is that real? What was that?
Yeah, those are not all CGI horses. Yeah. So it's something that I learned from doing like commercial projects for clients is like once you find out, when you're doing something on the road, once you find out where you're going to be, just like look around on the internet and see what's around there. Like go on Google Street View and like look around different streets and just search like what's interesting about this place and try and incorporate that into it if you can. And so I was doing that with Phoenix. Like I'd never spent any time in Phoenix, and so I was looking around and learned that there was this area where there are these wild horses that live along this river, but you can't like time when they're going to be where they're going to be because they're wild horses and it's hundreds of miles, hundreds of acres, And so, it was something that I thought, at the very least, we'll go there at sunset. And I know enough about horses, enough about animals, of especially wild animals. They drink a little in the morning and they drink a little at night, and that's what they do, unless it's really hot and they spend some time around water. But I thought, we'll go out there with Clifton and we'll have a nice scene along this beautiful river at the very least. And then at best, we will capture some wild horses. And in the script, the idea was it's kind of almost a blessing to him that he needs at that point in his where he's at on his journey. And we were lucky enough that they just walked right out at sunset, as the sun just had gone down behind the mountains, and it was a little blessing from the film gods.
Yeah, when I was watching, I was like, oh my God, that's real? There's no way.
Everyone, I thought that it was so clear that, one, they were real and not CGI, but also, two, that they were just wild horses walking out. But so many people just assumed that we had a horse wrangler doing that. And I'm like, man, I guess I should put that in the liner notes or something. Well,
the male horse notices Clifton. It's surreal.
Yeah. It's actually the
is that one
horses,
of the females?
She's a female. So horses, and not to get too deep in the weeds, but horses are a matriarchal society rather than patriarchal, and so they're always led by a mare. And so that lead mare, she comes out, and it's a white horse as well for anybody who hasn't seen it. And it's just you couldn't have written it any better than it turned out. But yeah, she walked out, and the other horses were kind of shy, and she sizes up Clifton, and Clifton did this really smart thing. He had been around horses enough to kind of know what to do. But because he could have done the wrong thing and she would have just run the other way or ran at him, but he just kind of bowed his head and crouched down and then watched her from kind of a lower vantage point, and then she dipped her head, and then the others kind of stepped out, and they had a couple foals with them. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. It's as beautiful a moment on in life as it turned out on film.
And I think that's only captured, if you will, maybe by a small team, not a huge film team. Can you talk a bit about, at times you guys had less than 10 people.
Yeah, our biggest crew size was 11 or 12 people. Most of the time we were just 10 people running around. And then for a scene like that, you strip it down even farther to just 4 people running around out there, And so, that was part of the DNA of the project from the beginning, is I wanted to strip it down small enough. I'd done so many, I come from a documentary background and had done this with some client projects, just for cash, of figuring out how to get something that feels really big with just a couple people. And I really wanted the film to feel as much like a documentary as possible, but a very well-planned documentary. And the only way to do that was to strip the crew down as small as possible. And it's something that we got everybody, a lot of interviews, they ask what were the difficulties of that, or what were the challenges? And there were challenges for sure, and we had just an amazing crew that did a lovely job and lived up to those challenges very well. But I think honestly, we got more magic than the challenges, whatever challenges we were beset by.
Well, we see it on screen, so it translates amazingly.
Yeah, it's something that's the hardest thing. What you were talking about a second ago of the I don't mean to ramble on with it, but the last thing I'll say that I learned through the process is the hardest thing to get on a film is poetry and magic, because you're doing everything. You have to set everything up and schedule everything and be here at this time and hope the light goes right, and then if it snows back there or something like that, you're just oh, amazing. Hopefully, usually, but if you can get a small crew, we would just be walking around out there, and then these geese would fly by towards the horizon. You could just turn and get them, and then come back down to Clifton, and it was amazing. Yeah.
You even had a beautiful plane shot that was amazing too. Wow.
Just this plane with the contrails and the
so cool. Let's talk about this cast: Clifton, Molly, Moises. It's seasoned veterans, and I love how there's. You obviously know Clifton, but I feel like they came into their roles extremely wanting to tackle these characters. I mean, I thought Molly was amazing.
No, she's incredible. We all think she's amazing. We're very lucky to work with Molly and Moises as well. He's just so deep and so like subtle with everything that he does that a lot of people, if they didn't recognize him, they thought he was somebody from the track, and I think that's like such a testament to him. But no, Molly was the first one that came on, and she was just somebody that we had written the role hoping she would take it. We wrote the role with Clifton and working with him and knew him, but like with Molly, we were just like, I hope she takes it. We didn't know her from anybody, but she does something in so many of her roles where she plays a role that could be very like simple and one-sided, and could be kind of, whether it's in her film or her television work. What I so admire about her acting is she takes those characters that another actor could just play very kind of flat and a little one-dimensional, and she finds 5 dimensions to it. Like she draws so much out of it, and holds very disparate things at the same time of about the characters. And that was something that was so important for this character, is like Ruth could go a lot of different ways, and if she swings too far, if she was played too far one direction or another, it would not be right. She could either be too hard and too stern, or too soft and kind of matronly, and just finding the middle road between those masculine and feminine sides that she has to hold at the same time is something that just Molly did effortlessly. And then Moises as well. That role was actually written for a jockey, and I was thinking a jockey would play it. And Moises was the only actor that we went out to, and he has to be someone. That role required someone who's not only an amazing actor, had the right body type, also had a passing resemblance to Clifton, so that you could believe it when he says, "I'm your kid." You could see it from an angle or another and believe it. And Moises just carried it all beautifully and did so much with just like so little, with just like a movement of his eyes. It was amazing.
Can you talk about the interesting contrast? Like we just talked about how horses are, matriarchal. The industry of horse racing is very male dominated. To see Molly play this character, I think, is its own story in itself.
Yeah, right.
And I know we have like young female writers right now that are making a wave right now in the racing world. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know that's not necessarily maybe something that was in the story, but I think it carries well just because of her performance. Yeah,
she does an amazing job, and she found a lot there from spending time with a female trainer on the backside named Stacy Campo, who just like welcomed us into her barn. And there were a lot of things that like, you're right, it's interesting to see, and it's sad, but like Stacy Campo's an amazing trainer and has great horses and all of that, and yet and has been going to this track for a long time, and yet has the last barn on the backside, and there's a lot like that. I think the jockeys, there are a lot of there's something about like horse racing where I will say this with the jockeys, that they're very competitive and they're fighting it out, but like when they all get in there, wherever they come from, or if they're male, female, it doesn't matter, like they're all kind of in it together, and I will say that was very refreshing to see.
Well, to kind of talk about the camaraderie of the jockeys, there's 2 things I really want to tackle. One was that machine that they use.
Oh yeah, the Equisizer.
Okay. Can you explain how difficult that is physically, but also what that's like for these guys learning exactly what to do? I think it was amazing to see those scenes. I'd never seen that machine before. I know, it's one of those things that I hadn't seen many of them either, and when I seen them in the past, I almost thought that but nobody uses those, do they? But they do. They use them. It's basically like, it looks like a fake horse. It's made out of wood. It has some carpet on it, and it's something that like is cheap enough that like anybody can build it with just some wood, a little carpet. You throw a saddle on it and get some trampoline springs, and you've got it. And basically, it's just
just like when a jockey rides, she or he is standing on their tiptoes, crouching over the horse, not sitting on the horse, but hovering just above it. And so all your weight is on your toes. And you're also like, you're leaning with the horse and leaning into it and guiding the horse into the turns, even down to the fact of like, what leg is the horse leading with? Are they leading with their left or are they leading with their right? And if we're coming down the back stretch and the horse is tired, I'm going to change up that leading leg. And they're doing that all by like a lot of times just touching the horse in various ways, or squeezing them or whatever with their heels. So back to the Equisizer, that's something that they just like, they get in shape on and train on. And also like, there's a lot of like, you're kind of guiding the rhythm of the horse's neck with your hands as a jockey. A lot of esoteric stuff that I don't pretend to be an expert on, but it is interesting to see on that. And if you see the movie, you see kind of like how it operates, and it's really hard. Like I can't do it very long.
Well, I love it because one of my favorite scenes is Clifton on it.
Yeah.
And the struggle of him knowing what Molly told him, I see you lean. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the most powerful scenes of the movie. Yeah. And it's all because of that crazy machine. It's like, well, I physically can understand it now.
I know, and thank you. There's something that's interesting too about like that one, and then watching Gabriel on it, Moises' character earlier on, you just see him like collapse back onto it, and you're like, damn, that must be really hard. But yeah, you wonder watching Clifton in that scene, watching Jackson struggle on it, you're like, how's this guy going to go into a race next?
And we've, not to give away anything, but we've seen a tragic incident occur.
Yeah.
And that must be mental. Speaking of that, and the jockeys, explain, you created Jockey Church, or this was an idea?
Well, it was actually, it was in a Jockey Church is where we shot it, but it's basically like an AA scene. And it's something that, it was just something that like Greg and I didn't write this in terms of like writing out what these jockeys were going to say, but we had this, there was a lot that I wanted to get across about horse racing and about the jockey's life. And there was a lot that like, you can't put it into dialogue or it would be too cheesy, you know, like if you put it into exposition, it just wouldn't work. And so there's a scene that I'd always loved from a Hal Ashby film called Coming Home that's got just these Vietnam vets, John Voight's sitting around with them, and they're just kind of
real vets too.
Real vets, yeah. And they're just talking about like what they've come from, and a lot of other movies have used this to beautiful effect as well. But that one affected me like very early on, and so we just set that up with this set a scene like that up where they're almost having like this AA group where they're just talking, and we shot it documentary style. And I would just throw out little prompts for them, like tell me about the first time you ever won a big race, or tell me about the first time you ever like really got hurt bad, and then they would just go from there. And it's funny because I didn't quite know if it would work, because it does break form so much and becomes a true documentary scene. But it's one of the best scenes of the movie, and it's one of that people respond to most.
And you can see Clifton kind of getting something from it, watching him, because he's very quiet in that sequence. I loved how subtle, like obviously he himself is gaining something just being there. Yeah,
and it's funny you say that. I'd forgotten about this until we were talking the other night, Clifton and I, and he reminded us that like Greg and I had written little things that he would say in there, or talked about things that he would say, and Clifton was like, no, I'm not, I'm actually not talking. And part of it was out of respect for like what the jockeys were opening up and giving, that he felt like there's a bit of like a moral stance that like I shouldn't put myself in here, into this kind of sacred space. But there was also the fact of like, he felt like as his character, he wasn't ready to open up, and he was totally right about that. And it's a good example of trusting a good actor to make the right call there.
Another element of it is, can you share with us about choosing to make Logan Leo in the movie, and that relationship they build? I don't want to give away what I think is kind of one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, is when they're just together in the hospital, but How important was it to have that character, someone who had lived that life?
Hugely important. It was something that, like, I can't imagine a day player coming on and doing that, or any actor really doing what Logan Cormier, who's a real jockey, for the viewers, doing in that role. It's just something that he does such a beautiful job. And also, like, that was something that was like, my hope was that we would find a jockey who could play that role, and the role was stripped down a lot in the original script, but he just came into our lives out there, and it had never been in front of the camera before, but yet was as talented and almost as skillful as a trained actor. And so we just, like, really expanded the role for him, and he did a beautiful job. But that was something early on, was like, I wanted, and it was kind of like the DNA of the project, of like as many first-time actors as possible, as many people from the track acting in the movie alongside these actors, and yeah, he was just such an amazing find.
There's a catharsis to especially Jackson's character, what he goes through, what he sees, how he handles certain information. As a director creating this story, kind of knowing that you have been connected to this world as well, was there any catharsis in making this for you?
Yeah, quite a bit. It's a good question. There was catharsis for a lot of us in odd ways that is still, like, happening. I was just talking to one of the crew members, and they revealed that, like, I had some stuff with my dad that I didn't really recognize until I made this movie. And that was just the other day. We were talking about this a couple months back. But, like, it was very, very personal for me. My dad was a jockey and all of that. But then it became, a lot of Greg's life got put into it in the writing of it. And a lot of Clifton's life got put into it in the writing of it. And a lot of, like, even our production designer was dealing with a lot of stuff, like, through this that pertained to his life. And to the point that I was worried that it wouldn't connect with a larger audience because it was so, like, personal. And maybe looking back, that's silly, because, like, it connected with so many people on our crew that I maybe should have seen it better. But it was very cathartic for all of us. And yes, I didn't get to come back around to your actual question, I didn't get a deep window into my dad's life as a jockey, even though we were close and I spent a lot of time with him on the tracks. It was mostly as a young man or a young boy, and then a little bit, like, when I was a young man and we were kind of, like, getting to know each other as adults, after and during and after college. But he didn't tell me a lot of stories. He didn't sit around, like, talking about the good old days or anything like that. And so I didn't have a deep window into that side of his life. And so making this, I felt like I got that. And he passed away, unfortunately, before we even made the movie. And so it did feel like having a bit of a conversation across the Great Divide a little bit, you know? So.
Wow, that's really special. I've got a festival question. You guys with Trent Spakos were at South by, which must have been great, because that was when South by was South by.
That was amazing.
Sundance experience now is obviously different than the Sundance we know because of COVID, but getting your film into Sundance, the reaction, AFI gave you guys some awards. You guys have still gotten this to places that people have recognized. I mean, you got a Cassavetes Award with...
we're nominated.
Oh, yeah, nominated.
Fingers crossed, but we're nominated right now.
I mean, as far as the reaction of the festival world to the film, what does that mean to you for something that is so, what feels like a small, intimate film?
No, it's huge. I mean, it's a dream come true. It's something that it's really funny, because the process of this project was a long one of, like, trying to make it in the studio system and out in LA, trying to find people to make it. But I was writing, like, and Greg and I were developing a project that I thought people wanted, you know, and it never worked, and for good reason. And then only when we hit every roadblock that you can, and there was no hope for the project ever getting made, then that was when I just decided to make the film that only I could make, and then a film that I'd want to see, even if nobody else wanted to see it. And I thought, like, this is maybe the only movie I'll ever make, and so I just make something that, like, I would want to pop on 20 years from now and be like, yeah, still, this is the movie that I wanted to see that nobody else made, and so. Yeah, to get it recognized by Sundance, and then, which is every filmmaker's dream, and then to go on from there and outside of the festival world to be picked up by Sony Pictures Classics, and to get to work with Michael Barker and Tom Bernard is just like, it's all been a dream come true that I feel like I might wake up from and be like, oh no, it was all a dream. But it's been incredible.
Well, I implore you and Greg to not give up what you're doing and keep making films, because you obviously are doing well. I mean, even something like Running with Beto was amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful doc.
I'm curious, as far as what's next, is there anything like down the pipeline you can share with us, or things that you're thinking about working with Greg or Nancy? I don't, whatever the team's thinking.
Trying to work with Greg and Nancy as much as possible, and we've got quite a few things that we're working on. And there's things that we've been developing for a long time. Like you're always like developing things in the backgrounds. Hopefully we'll do one that Greg directs again next. That's what we're working on now. But yeah, I think the big lesson that I learned off of Jockey was just like, Jockey was, it was a minuscule budget, that not something that on the surface you would say like, oh, you moved forward in your career, and yet like it was able to be artistically pure because of that, and that was a big lesson of like, I want to continue making movies that feel like that, at whatever budget scale they end up at, but yeah, there's just something, I think, we're at a really interesting time in filmmaking where you actually can do stuff for very cheap, cheap in terms of how much you pay for it, not in terms of how it looks in the end, and I really want to lean into that, so not trying to be too vague.
Yeah, no, well, you've got to sell it eventually, I get that. I'm curious then, as far as getting that look, can you talk about working with Adolfo on the look of the film? And you guys shot on the Aria, Alexa, the little one?
The Alexa Mini, yeah.
Well, having the comfort of being to move and how close we get to the jockey. There are shots in this film that I feel like you guys were trying to attempt to do something a little different than maybe we've seen in other bigger Seabiscuit type things.
Yeah. And that was a lot of different. That was the approach on a lot of the racing scenes for sure. Well, not a lot of the racing. The only racing scenes that are in here. But that was the approach, and that came from something where I was doing director prep for the movie, or before we even had a budget, and I was trying to figure out how to shoot races, and so I pulled down every race that I could find from every horse racing movie from YouTube, and I put it in editing software, and I just started cutting it up to see like what are the actual shots that they got, so I can make a shot list and like, what did they do? And I realized at a certain point, out of these like 5 races that I had outside of one movie, I couldn't tell what races came from what movie. They all seemed interchangeable, and part of that is just the mechanics of how they run around the track and everything, but also part of it I was like, that was something we wanted to take into it, and Adolfo and I talked very early on about like, how do we make these different, especially on a low budget, like how do we take something that's we've got a limitation. How do we take that limitation and make it feel much bigger, and make it actually like lean into the limitation to find the bigger thing on the other side. But then that also became just kind of the approach of a lot of it of like taking this documentary side, but never forgetting that we're trying to make cinema, and not just letting it, not just. I think sometimes you see an expression of doc-style filmmaking, and that just means not thinking about the framing and not thinking about the craft of it, it seems, and just like kind of throwing that away. But how do you take a lot of Adolfo and I's early conversations is like, how do you take this realism and naturalism and like this neorealism style and elevate it up to something very cinematic, and so it came from something very expressive. And how do you mix that like doc style filmmaking also with some very expressive cinematic styling, for lack of a better word, and so like moving the camera upside down and things like that at times where it's always has to be motivated by the story. And so that became really fun to think about, of like, how are you moving the camera and when? And Adolfo just has such a brilliant sense of that. That's very intrinsic for him, I think, in a way that was always fun and surprising for me.
Was there any film that helped inspire you while doing this process?
There was a ton. It was a lot of movies from outside of the States and outside of America. So like Kiarostami films really inspired me. Taste of Cherry was one that like I really connected with. Ratcatcher was another one by Lynn Ramsey.
She's terrific, by the way.
No, she's incredible.
Wow.
All of these people all these directors are legends. There's another one by Alice Rohrwacher called Happy as Lazaro.
Okay, yeah.
That's amazing. And all of these movies, I think what I was connecting with about them is they do this, what I was hoping to be able to achieve is like they take a very simple story, a very simple style, and they elevate it to something much more poetic. And they find something almost kind of mythic in something very simple. And they also, the other thing I like about it is because they're made in other countries, and I'm not as familiar with Iranian actors as I am American actors, I can't tell who's an actor and who's not, you know, in this movie that I'm watching. And so it takes me even deeper into it. And also they get across a culture, and I feel like in this hour and a half, I feel like I've traveled somewhere else and come back home. And so all of those things, I was hoping to achieve all of those things. And also they allow themselves to be quiet. And that's something that I was really trying to lean into with this movie, is like, how can you allow it to be quiet and allow it to be still, but never inert, you know? So.
Yeah, the negative space quality of this film is quite remarkable. Just how silence is important in certain circumstances.
Yeah, there's a concept called Ma, which is like, it's like the silence between claps, and that's just as important as the clapping. And that was something I was thinking about.
Very poetic feeling.
I was just trying to think of who I heard say that. That's not my own. I'm borrowing that from somebody else. But
well, Clint, thank you for making this film. It was mind-blowing to watch it. I felt
thank you very much.
Fully immersed into it. I guess one thing I read in the press notes that really I was surprised by, but Molly adds a little bit of improv into this film.
Yes, yeah.
I never would have guessed it, but now talking to you, I get how that was possible. How important is it when you watch your film? Do you notice the moments that were like, I wrote that, or no, I didn't capture that? Like, do you get surprised when you watch your own film now?
I don't know. Maybe in a few years I will. I've watched it so many times to like watch the color timing and watch and watch for this and watch for that I don't. Now I just pick it apart. But I know I will get, and so I don't really watch it when we're like at these screenings. But I will one day, and maybe I will then. But yeah, it was such. It grew so organically. Greg and I were rewriting it every night in the hotel room, working with Clifton, working with Molly and Moises on like the scenes for the next day, and then also just like letting things come in to the movie, letting life come into the movie in a way that like it was a very like buttoned up script when we got there, and yet half of it got thrown out for like what came. And so yeah, Molly just like, she was going through some stuff personally, and she was learning some things about this horse racing community that she felt like should be in the movie, and was just like talked out that monologue that's so beautiful and it's so perfect, and it's a moment that like kind of anchors the middle of the movie there and gives it a thematic weight that maybe was there underneath, but like she says it in a way that you understand more about even Jackson's character by what she's going through. And then Clifton, the monologue at the end where he's talking about his father, that's Clifton's story where he's talking about that. And then one of my favorite things in the movie is Leo, played by Logan Cormier, the jockey, talking about how I'm not afraid of dying, I'm just afraid of not being able to ride. And that whole thing was just something that like he just started saying in the scene, and there's so much of that it all I love a lot of it, but one day I'll be able to appreciate it a little more.
Well, I think that's perfect. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you for talking.
And Clint, please don't stop it. This is it's only the first feature, hopefully, of many. So
thank you.
I hope you and Greg continue your journey, and Nancy. Y'all are a great producing team.
Yeah.
But that was our chat with Clint Bentley.
Thank you.